All right, good morning. Welcome to our One Sioux Falls media briefing today. Almost a year ago, we announced the 2050 vision for kids and families for our community. Our current population, as you know, is about 220,000. And in 2050, we estimate that we will have around 368,000 people in Sioux Falls. So if you think about where we're growing, where we're headed, by 2050, we're going to be a massive city. We will have about 494,000 people in our MSA in 2050, 500,000 people in our MSA in 2050. So because of that, we put together a plan to think big and to vision for 2050. That started with the opportunity to purchase about 8 acres of land at 10th and Cliff when we made this announcement a year ago for a vision that we call the Riverline District, which could include a new, more modern and larger convention center and the repurpose of the existing convention center. We reached this vision and this idea partly this year through Johnson Consulting's report, we're going to talk about this in a minute, that determined initially that a convention center could be and would be the highest and best use for this land at 10th and Cliff. We also know, even after last night's vote for our city council where we approved more indoor recreation space in our community, that our community wants more of this sort of recreation space in our city. As we grow, that can be used year-round. In fact, I just got some numbers, and our attendance at the West Side Recreation Center so far, we've already sold more passes than we plan to sell for the entire year in the first 2 weeks of being open. And so it's been a home run. The demand is certainly there for more indoor rec in the city of Sioux Falls. So what we want to do today is basically give an update. So that was a year ago that we're at the convention center and we made this announcement for what our city needs to look like in 2050. And our role as elected leaders is to dream for the community and to think for not just days and weeks and months ahead, but for years and decades ahead. So the next step in this whole process was needing to understand if this vision would work for this Riverline land and to repurpose the existing convention center. So last July, we released what was called a Phase 1A report from this organization called Johnson Consulting that we contracted with. And that was called the Convention Center Review and Market Analysis. That analysis examined the feasibility of a convention center. Do we need a larger convention center? Do we need a new convention center in the city of Sioux Falls? And as most of us would anticipate, that report said, yeah, this community could absolutely support a newer and larger convention center at a place like the Riverline District. Again, by way of history, current convention center is 30 years old and was built at a time when our population was 114,000. In 2050, we will be 368,000. So if we're not thinking about the next step in this, shame on us. So tomorrow, at a joint meeting with the Riverline Steering Committee and Event Center Complex Advisory Board, we're going to be reviewing Phase 1B of this feasibility study. So the next step in the Johnson report. And it's really discovery, it's entitled, this report, and it will be made public, Discovery and Due Diligence Study of the Convention Center and Arena Facility. So basically looking at those facilities and what can we do with those facilities if this vision does in fact continue to move forward. So we want to give it just a high-level preview of that today. So the purpose of this study is to look at the overall conditions of the existing convention center and arena, to identify the opportunities for repurposing those facilities and develop concepts that we could consider, and then provide estimates for the infrastructure repair, the replacement, the renovation of those facilities. So you're going to see some things in this report like you see on the screen. I want to really stress that these are the equivalent of napkin sketches to us here in the city. We just have to know can things fit in there? What could go in there? There's nothing that's being committed to at all, but we have to start playing with the space out there to see, could something like this work? So a big part of this study by Johnson was looking at how we could repurpose the convention center while still retaining some of its capacity for multi-use for events. So when there's things held at the Premier Center, there's times they also need additional space over in the existing convention center. So the report takes that into account. As you can see here, there's the space you'd be working with the convention center flat floor space. At a very basic level, this report is going to show that it would be very feasible to repurpose space for indoor rec while also retaining flexible space for some convention center events. So it's going to look at several options for the arena as well. For the arena, everything from light renovations to heavy remodel work to demoing the arena and potentially putting something new there. So there's really no commitment there. This is where there's going to be a lot of public input and ideas and thoughts around the arena as history shows us on some recent conversations around projects. Sioux Falls likes their history in certain aspects, and the arena is a big historical marker in our community. So there's going to be a lot of discussion around preservation versus starting fresh. Overall, indoor recreation at the arena could include indoor play, could include sport courts, pickleball, walking tracks, gathering rooms. You can certainly just start thinking and dreaming, removing the bleachers, whatever. So the goal of this phase of studies was pretty simple. It was just really to consider whether or not a new, larger convention center is even feasible at the Riverline District, which it is. And if it is, what can we do with the current space? And so now that we've been assured that this does in fact work, that the space will work, and that Sioux Falls can support this convention facility in our downtown, now the real, honestly, the hard work begins, a lot of the really deep work. A lot of financial analysis, a lot of public engagement, things like this. What would the public want to see? What would be their need to haves versus want to haves at a facility like this? How would we transport people there? What would be a cost model? What would it cost to do some of the things that the public is asking for us to do? Does the city even have the financial wherewithal to do what the public wants us to do? So still a lot of work to be done, but a next step in the process has been taken. So we tried to be just really thoughtful, strategic on this process, but I can't stress this enough, how just transformational visions just take a lot of time. And I was reminded of that several times over the last few weeks, most recently when we cut the ribbon at the Steel District, and Craig leaned over to me and he's like, 11 years ago I had my first conversation around this thing. And it's like, wow, 11 years is a long time for that project. And that didn't need a whole lot of public, okay? That was private. When you have something like this that's very, very public, it takes time and it takes a lot of work. So public's going to be part of this vision. What people will say, what does it cost? No idea. And so anybody who shares a number and says, I'm hearing this will cost this or that, please send them my way, because I would like to know how they got those numbers, because we don't know what we're building. We don't know the size of a convention center. We don't know how big it would be. We don't know how parking will work. We don't know what will be in an arena or convention center. We don't know if we'll have an arena. So many unknowns yet. But the ball is moving down the field on it. So that will be what the task force will be reviewing tomorrow, and they'll get that information again, and then that will be made public. I want to thank that task force work. Most recently, they made a big step in the process with the steering committee recommending the purchase of the land at 10th and Cliff that we'll be closing on here soon, and so that's a big step as well. So that's an update on this Riverline vision, and specifically what we're lumping into a bigger vision of 2050, because a lot of times the word Riverline is getting all the attention and downtown is getting all the attention, but the other big component of this is what could happen at that campus to activate that space year-round, as well as daily also. So with that, it certainly would entertain any questions that you may have on this update. Yeah.
I'm curious how, if at all, the Premier Center and the Birdcage fit into these kind of future discussions.
So the Premier Center, very much so, because no matter what happens to the convention center, even if the convention center stays a convention center and this whole thing goes away, they're kissing cousins and they work together on so many things. So the Premier Center has quite a few events, not quite a few, several, where they need the space of the convention center. And so in conversations with them and ASM Global, who helps manage that for us, they've made clear that, hey, we want to make sure that we still have flexibility. So what that could mean is this: you wouldn't have a repurposed convention center that's all chopped up with a lot of equipment that couldn't be used and things like that, because it would have to be able to be turned over for an extension of a Premier Center event, let's say, basketball courts, pep rallies, things like that for Summit League events. So they're certainly a part of it. The Birdcage is more on the event center master plan. So not necessarily part of the 2050 vision. Certainly in the discussion, we know the Birdcage is aging. It's kind of a separate discussion than this, but they would really like to see, I know the ownership of the Canaries as well as the city would like to see more daily activation of that campus. And so that's one of the things that really excites us about this opportunity is, instead of right now driving out there and there's 13 cars there because there's not an event today, there'd be 150 cars because people are out there using the facility on the walking tracks, doing different things, finally maybe getting a little bit of economic development at a coffee shop, things like that that could be supported, and activating that space year-round and daily.
You talked about how the Premier Center still needs space in the convention center. Is the idea that you would repurpose it as needed, or would there be a set convention space and set rec space?
They would be repurposed as needed. So the primary use of that convention center space, based on this report, they're saying is, and what the community is telling us they would like, is indoor recreation space. But could it flex for some needs the Premier Center may have, right? So that would no longer, though, be a primary convention center locale. If the Catholic Daughters of America are coming to Sioux Falls for a conference, they would not be out there. They would be downtown in a new modern, appropriately sized, access to parking and amenities convention center. So there wouldn't be a ton of situations, in my opinion, where the whole facility would have to be converted, but there certainly are. Summit League's a great example, where Summit League needs a whole bunch of space outside of just the Premier Center, and they want to make sure that if we keep that tournament and those sort of events, that would be possible.
I know a lot of conversation around the proposed Riverline District has been the talk of this going to a public vote. What still needs to happen before we really are even speaking on a timeline for a public vote here?
Super great question. The question is, when and if this would go to a public vote, a lot of things need to happen. And so you want to make sure when the community has a chance to vote on something that a concept, an idea is fully baked and all questions have been answered. So one of the big questions that has to be answered first and foremost is, what are we voting on? Okay? What are we voting on? Are we voting on funding a convention center downtown, and what at the current convention center and arena? Are we funding on demolishing an arena, remodeling an arena? What are we building there? So the what is the next step. Then how will we pay for it? So they're voting on how will we pay for this? And that's still unclear. I can tell you right now, we would not have the bonding capacity as a city to just bond for a vision like this. So we have to figure that out, how we would pay for this. It doesn't keep us from moving the ball down the road. And a good example of that would be, we're working with the airport right now on an expansion, and they have ideas and architect drawings, and they're working through engineering costs and designs, but they don't know how they're going to fund that thing fully yet. But they have to keep the process moving so that if and when those funds are ready, they are ready. So we're kind of working simultaneously. So you won't hear me committing to a public vote date on this. The challenge a little bit is that I have 15 months in the chair, and I want to make sure how this vision crosses administrations is done in the right way. And I don't know what that looks like yet. And so just having a vote to have a vote during my time in office is not my goal. If it has to just continue to percolate and work through the next administration to see if he or she wants to continue to move this forward based on all the information we can provide them, so be it. So a lot of things need to happen. And I think after tomorrow, when the task force receives this 1B study, there's going to be a little bit of a lull because a lot of the work will have to be done now. That's when a lot of the unsexy work is going to have to be done behind the scenes, but also some more public stuff with public engagement is going to start to become really important. There hasn't been a lot of, I mean, candidly, there hasn't been a lot of that to date. We haven't had open houses on this. We haven't had public surveys. And because we first had to say, is this possible? As a consultant, we don't want to do all that. And a consultant says, this won't work, and here's why. Well, they have said it works. So it's like, all right, now we know we can go with the next step. Long answer, but it's complicated. A lot of things going on. Yeah.
What is the best way for the public to share their thoughts on this at this time? Is there public input at the meeting tomorrow, or if as people are reading the report, if they have ideas? I mean, what should people do with that stuff at this time?
Yeah, usually to tweet at me angrily is always the best. But outside of that, we'll be starting a formal public engagement process. Don't know what that's going to look like. Don't even know who's going to lead it. So there will be opportunities for that. So sorry that I don't know, because I don't know, but it will certainly be a part of the process.
You talked about the population growth reaching 368,000 in 2050. How do you arrive at that number, or how did you calculate that?
Yeah, if we just continue to grow around that 2.5% every year, and continue to compound that, that's about where we'll be. And that's historically what we've grown at. So 2.5% though of 114,000 versus 2.5% of 220,000 now. That's why when I started in office, we were even growing by 3,000 to 4,000 a year, and now it's 6,000 a year. So that 2.5% is becoming a bigger number. So that's the population estimate that we use, and we've been pretty historically right on that line for the last several decades. All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it. More to come, a lot more to come on this. And we encourage you to continue to reach out to us with questions. When I say us, some of the leaders of this, Councilor Rich McCurris is the council liaison and the leader on the task force for that the city council appointed. And then Sean Pritchett, Don Carney, and Brett Collars are really involved in the recreation side of this and what that could look like. So thank you.